Okay, this is the outline that we've been following here, and we're still in this main section, the big long section of the book, going from chapter 3 through to chapter 27. We've covered the first round of speeches between Job and his three friends in chapters 4 to 14, and we're now into the second round of speeches from chapter 15 through to chapter 21, which is hopefully where we will finish up this evening. So this is where we are in the second round. We began last week looking at Eliphaz's second speech in chapter 15 and Job's reply to Eliphaz in chapters 16 and 17. And then this evening we have two speeches to look at, Bildad's second speech and Job's reply to that, and then Zophar's second speech in chapter 20 and Job's reply in chapter 21. So quite a few chapters to try to get through this evening, but hopefully we will be okay. So I'm going to begin here in chapter 18, and this is Bildad's second speech in the series here. So we'll read through the whole chapter. It's not too long, of 21 verses. So Job chapter 18. Then Bildad the Shuhite said in reply, "How long? Put an end to talk. Consider, and then we shall speak. Why are we thought of as brutes, regarded by you as stupid? You who tear yourself to pieces in anger. Will earth's order be disrupted for your sake? Will rocks be dislodged from their place? Indeed, the light of the wicked fails. The flame of his fire does not shine. The light in his tent darkens. His lamp fails him. His iniquitous strides are hobbled. His schemes overthrow him. He is led by his feet into the net. He walks on to the toils. The trap seizes his heel. The noose tightens on him. The rope for him lies hidden on the ground. His snare on the path. Terrors assault him on all sides and send his feet flying. His progeny hunger. Disaster awaits his wife. The tendons under his skin are consumed. Death's firstborn consumes his tendons. He is torn from the safety of his tent. Terror marches him to the king. It lodges in his desolate tent. Sulphur is strewn upon his home. His roots below dry up, and above his branches wither. All mention of him vanishes from the earth. He has no name abroad. He is thrust from light to darkness, driven from the world. He has no seed or breed among his people, no survivor where he once lived. Generations to come will be appalled at his fate, as the previous ones are seized with horror. These were the haunts of the wicked. Here was the place of him who knew not God. Bildad now makes his second response to Job. This is Bildad's second speech, and he's responding to the previous speech of Job here. And he begins by rebuking Job for the way in which he has spoken to his friends. He asks how long Job is going to go on talking, and he suggests that he should put an end to talk, stop talking, and then take a moment to pause and consider. And in verse 3, he asks him, "Why are we thought of as brutes, regarded by you as stupid?" Why, Job, why do you think that we are stupid? Job, in his earlier speech in chapter 16, verse 9, had said that it was God who was tearing into him with anger. In chapter 16, verse 9, Job said of God, "In his anger he tears and persecutes me, he gnashes his teeth at me." But here Bildad says that Job is tearing himself to pieces with his own anger in verse 4. Bildad also questions Job's assertion in an earlier speech in chapter 14, where Job spoke of the rocks being dislodged from their place, and Bildad is asking Job here if he thinks that the earth is going to be disrupted for his sake. Does Job want the earth to be rebuilt and reconstructed in order to suit him? Does Job think that he can change the natural order of things? And in Bildad's mind, the natural order of things is the principle that suffering is the consequence of the sins of the wicked. So he's questioning Job, do you want to change all of that around? And Bildad believes that his view on this is the right one, and so why won't Job simply accept it? Well, he goes on in verses 5 to 21 to give another description of the terrible things that await the wicked, that things are just going to get worse for the wicked. And by implication, Job's suffering will get worse if he ignores the advice of his friends. In Bildad's view, the fate of the wicked follows this natural moral order, that the wicked have done things to deserve suffering, and that's why they're going through all of this, and that would include Job as well. So in verses 5 and 6, he speaks there of his light, the light of the wicked being turned to darkness. He says there, indeed, the light of the wicked fails, the flame of his fire does not shine. You might be thinking there of his fire in his home going out. Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 9 uses a similar illustration of the light and darkness here as well. Proverbs 13 verse 9 says, the light of the righteous is radiant, the lamp of the wicked is extinguished. So the idea that the light of the wicked is being put out, and that's what the illustration Bildad is using here as well. And then in verses 7 to 10, images are used from hunting to show how the wicked will become entrapped by their own actions, and they will be brought down by their own schemes. He says, his iniquitous strides are hobbled. The Revised Standard Version translates that as his strong steps are shortened. So the wicked takes these strong steps, these big strides, but then he gets caught out, and his strides are shortened because he's about to be entrapped. And 6 different devices that are used in hunting or trapping are mentioned here. He mentions the net, the pit, the trap, the noose, the snare, and the rope. And the picture here is of the wicked person getting caught up in these devices and getting trapped by them. And then fears will terrify him and pursue him. He suffers illness and disease as well. He says here in verse 13, the tendons under his skin are consumed. Death's firstborn consumes his tendons. So death is being personified here as if death has a firstborn child, a firstborn who devours the dead. And then he says that he is torn from the safety of his tent. So the place where the wicked person is living safely and securely in his tent, well, he's dragged out of his tent. The tent may also be an illustration here of the body itself, which this could perhaps be a reference to death, that in the New Testament, the physical body is described as being a tent or a tabernacle. And so here his soul, his real self is being torn from his tent, from his body. And he says, terror marches him to the king. Again, perhaps a reference to him being taken off, terror marching him off to the king, being taken off to the place of the dead. So it may be a sort of illustration here of death taking place. But either way, his tent is being left desolate or empty, and sulfur is being scattered over his dwelling place. And the idea of scattering sulfur would be to pollute it, much in the same way as salt might be scattered upon the land to make the land infertile. So sulfur is being pictured here as being scattered over his dwelling place to make it uninhabitable. And then in verses 16 to 19, Bildad describes the wicked with his roots drying up and his branches withering. So the picture of root and branch is that of completeness. So he's dead from root to branch. Here it's being used as an illustration, perhaps, of the wicked's condition of childlessness, which would be a cruel reminder to Job of the death of his own children. in this condition, he has no name. So he has lost his name, lost his reputation in the world. He has no offspring and no descendants. So there's no survivor who can carry his name on. It's as if he never existed. So once he's gone, then he's completely forgotten. And the things that are described here by Bildad are the things that will distinguish the good from the wicked and will serve as a warning to all. So in the concluding verses of his speech, he says, generations to come will be appalled at his fate, as the previous ones are seized with horror. So he's looking there at both past generations and future generations, those who are to come and those who have lived in the past. They're going to be appalled at the fate of the wicked or seized with terror. So people will be talking about this over all generations. The Revised Standard Version translates verse 20 here as they of the west are appalled at his day, and horror seizes them of the east. So uses the directions of west and east. And again, the idea there is of that completeness of everyone from west to east. Everyone is going to be appalled at the fate of the wicked. And people will look at the condition of the wicked and they will conclude, here was the place of him who knew not God. So when they see all of this, they'll say, well, this person did not know God. And although not plainly stated here, Bildad is perhaps thinking that Job is one of those who did not know God. So this is why these things have happened to Job. So this is the place of him who did not know God. Job replies now to Bildad's speech in chapter 19, and he begins by rebuking his friends in verses 1 to 4 of chapter 19. Job said in reply, "How long will you grieve my spirit and crush me with words? Time and again you humiliate me and are not ashamed to abuse me. If indeed I have erred, my error remains with me." Job expresses his despair caused by the things said to him by his friends. He says that they have grieved his spirit. These words have hurt him, and they've crushed him with their words. We sometimes use that saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Well, words do hurt when they're spoken in this way, and these words of his friends hurt Job. He was crushed by their words. And he says there that they have humiliated him time and again. The Revised Standard Version follows a more literal translation here and says, these 10 times. 10 times you have humiliated, number 10 meaning that time and time again you have been humiliating me. So they've only made matters worse for Job. And they really have no understanding of what it is like to go through this suffering that Job is going through. And verse 4 may be understood here to mean that even if Job has done something wrong, well, that's a matter between him and God, and it's none of their business, and so they should stop interfering. So he says in verse 4, if indeed I have erred, my error remains with me. Well, no, that's my problem. That's none of your business if I have done that which is wrong. He continues now in verses 5 to 12 to give this picture of God laying siege to him. He says here, though you are overbearing toward me, reproaching me with my disgrace, yet know that God has wronged me. He has thrown up siege works around me. I cry violence, but am not answered. I shout, but can get no justice. He has barred my way, I cannot pass. He has laid darkness upon my path. He has stripped me of my glory, removed the crown from my head. He tears down every part of me, I perish. He uproots my hope like a tree. He kindles his anger against me. He regards me as one of his foes. His troops advance together. They build their road toward me and encamp around my tent. Job is blaming God for his condition and accusing God of wronging him. And Job thinks that God has set up his siege works around him, that the net is closing in on Job. He complains that God does not answer him when he cries out violence. We sometimes hear the saying that justice delayed is justice denied. And as long as God delays answering Job, as long as God is silent, then justice is being denied to Job. God has broken him down and destroyed his hope, he says, like an uprooted tree. Earlier in chapter 14, Job had spoken of a tree being chopped down and the stump being left in the ground, and that stump can produce new life and a shoot will grow from it. But an uprooted tree has no hope of producing new life. If it's pulled up by its roots, then that's the end of it. And that's how Job sees himself here, that God has destroyed his hope like this uprooted tree. And God, Job says, regards him as an enemy, that they've become enemies. And he gives us this picture here of this siege of God bringing his army to surround Job's tent, bringing his troops against Job. So he feels that he's being besieged by God in all of this. Then in verses 13 to 22, Job goes on to say that he has been forsaken by everyone. Everyone has forsaken him. He says here from verse 13 to 22, he alienated my kin from me, my acquaintances disown me, my relatives are gone, my friends have forgotten me, my dependents and maidservants regard me as a stranger. I am an outsider to them. I summon my servant, but he does not respond. I must myself entreat him. My odour is repulsive to my wife. I am loathsome to my children. Even youngsters disdain me. When I rise, they speak against me. All my bosom friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and flesh. I escape with the skin of my teeth. Pity me, pity me. You are my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you pursue me like God, maligning me insatiably? Job here in verses 13 to 19 reflects upon his circumstances, how his circumstances have had this effect upon his circle of human relationships. He speaks of his kin, his family, his acquaintances, his relatives, his friends, his dependents, his maid servants and his servants. He speaks of his wife, his siblings and young children, his intimate friends. And in one way or another, he says that they have all rejected him, that they all treat him as an outcast. At the end there in verse 19, he says, all my bosom friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. So those who should have been closest to Job, who had those closest relationships with him, Job says they've all gone. They've all left me. They've turned against me. And Job again is blaming God for this. As he begins the section there in verse 13, he says of God, referring to God, he alienated my kin from me. It was God who did this. God caused this division between myself and my acquaintances. And he refers at the end there in verse 20 to the physical impact that all of this is having upon his body. In verse 20, he says, my bones stick to my skin and flesh. I escape with the skin of my teeth. We saw in last week as well how he described his physical condition as this emaciated appearance. And again, we see that here when he describes his bones sticking to his skin. He's all skin and bones, we might say. And he also says that he's narrowly avoided death with the skin. I escape with the skin of my teeth. And if you've ever wondered where that phrase comes from, people use it of a narrow escape by the skin of my teeth. Well, this is where it comes from. Job pleads that his friends might show him some pity. Pity me, he says, pity me. You're my friends. This is heartfelt plea coming from Job. These are his friends he's addressing, and he's seeking that pity from them. And again, he sees God as the source of his troubles. He says, for the hand of God has struck me. And he asks his friends as well why they relentlessly pursue him like God. Why are they acting like God in their pursuit of him? Are they not satisfied with what they've done? But amongst all of this, Job still has faith, still has a faith that he will be vindicated. In verses 23 to 29, he says, oh, that my words were written down, would they were inscribed in a record, incised on a rock forever, with iron, stylus, and lead. But I know that my vindicator lives. In the end, he will testify on earth. This after my skin will have been peeled off. But I would behold God while still in my flesh. I myself, not another, would behold him, would see with my own eyes. My heart pines within me. You say, how do we persecute him? The root of the matter is in him. Be in fear of the sword, for your fury is iniquity worthy of the sword. No, there is a judgment. Job wants a permanent record to be made of his words. He wants his assertion of innocence to be recorded, inscribed, a permanent record of this. And he speaks of it being incised on a rock forever with iron, stylus, and lead. So write this in rock, put it in stone so that it will be preserved and people can read this. But despite all that is happening to him, Job has faith that his vindicator lives. So the Revised Standard Version translates this in verse 25, I know that my Redeemer lives. And of course, that's a hymn, that words from the hymn that we sing, I know that my Redeemer lives. Again, that's where this comes from. The Hebrew word translated here as vindicator or redeemer is the word goel. And it's a word that's used of a family member known as a kinsman redeemer who would act in order to put something right when some problem has arisen within the family, to put that matter right. And that may be to avenge a murder. If a family member has been murdered, then the kinsman redeemer had the right to pursue the murderer and to kill them. Numbers chapter 35 verse 19 is an example of that. It may also be to redeem a person if a family member was in debt and sold themselves into slavery. The redeemer could come and buy them back out of slavery to restore them. Or if a family member had to sell a piece of property in order to pay off a debt, again, the redeemer would come and buy that property back so it could remain within the family. And then also another example is of the action of the redeemer is to marry a childless widow so that she could have children for her dead husband. And this is what we see in the story of Boaz and Ruth. Boaz was the kinsman redeemer, the closest relative of Naomi. Naomi was Ruth's mother-in-law. Ruth was a widow. Her first husband had died, and Boaz, as the kinsman redeemer, would marry her and produce children in the name of her dead husband. So this was the role of the redeemer, the kinsman redeemer, the Goel. But the Lord is also seen as Israel's redeemer. God himself is Israel's redeemer. He is the one who acts to redeem or to put things right for Israel. Many references really that speak of God as the redeemer. We'll just look at a few here. Exodus chapter 6 and verse 6 speaks of God redeeming Israel from their condition in Egypt, their slavery in Egypt. Exodus chapter 6, verse 6, say therefore to the Israelite people, I am the Lord, I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians and deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary chastisement. So God promises to redeem Israel from their experience in Egypt. Psalm 19, verse 14. Give another example here. Psalm 19, verse 14. I think that's wrong. Verse 15. May the words of my mouth and the prayer of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Last verse of the psalm there, God referred to as redeemer. And then from Isaiah, look at one from Isaiah here. Isaiah 59, verse 20. Isaiah 59, verse 20. He shall come as redeemer to Zion, to those in Jacob who turn back from sin, declares the Lord. And that verse is quoted by Paul, Romans chapter 11, verse 26 as well. A number of other verses as well listed there on the slide, some from Isaiah as well. But we see the Lord being referred to in the same way as this Redeemer. And this is what Job is speaking of here. He speaks of his vindicator lives. So for Job, the vindicator, the Redeemer who lives is God himself. He is the one who will vindicate Job, who will stand up and speak for Job. And Job is confident that he will see God for himself in the flesh. He says in verse 26 and 27, but I would behold God while still in my flesh. I myself, not another, would behold him, would see with my own eyes. So amidst all of the despair, this is really a wonderful expression of Job's faith that God will be his vindicator, his redeemer. And whether this takes place on earth as a sort of last minute reprieve for Job, or whether it's something that takes place after his death is unclear from the passage here. It's a difficult passage to interpret, and the commentators are divided on this. Some see it as, well, this is Job is going to experience this during his lifetime on earth, and others see it as this is Job being vindicated after his death. But Job concludes the speech here by warning his friends that if they continue to insist that he is the root of his own problems, then they will have to face judgment themselves. He tells them in verse 29 there to be in fear of the sword, know that there is a judgment. So they need to be careful. He's warning them of the things that they are saying to Job in suggesting that Job is his own worst enemy, that Job has brought all this upon himself, because they will be judged for that. So a summary of these two speeches here, Bildad's second speech that we've seen in chapter 18, a brief summary of that speech here. God's judgment of the wicked is severe, and those who are subject to it, including you, Job, can be classified as those who do not know God. That's essentially what Bildad is saying there in that speech. And then Job's reply in chapter 19, saying, despite your accusations, I have done nothing. Yet God, in his inexplicable anger, has made a mess of my life. I am an outcast, despised by all. I'm confident that someone will come to help, and that just when all seems finally lost, I will be vindicated. You supposed friends are in more jeopardy than I am. So those are summaries there of those two speeches. We'll move on then to chapter 20. now, and we have Zophar's second speech in chapter 20. And this is actually Zophar's final speech. He only speaks twice. He's not included in the third round. So this is the final time that we will hear from Zophar. So chapter 20 is his speech. And Zophar has been offended by Job's words, and he feels compelled to reply. He begins in verses 1 to 3. Zophar the Naamathite said in reply, "In truth, my thoughts urge me to answer. It is because of my feelings when I hear reproof that insults me. A spirit out of my understanding makes me reply." So he argues, he goes on in verse 4, he says, "Do you not know this, that from time immemorial, since man was set on earth, the joy of the wicked has been brief, the happiness of the impious fleeting?" So he argues here that, as those have argued previously, that the wicked get what they deserve when they suffer. And he says that this is something that has been true from time immemorial since man was set on earth. So this is how it's always been the case. By appealing to the past, then he hopes to convince Job that he's right. And this is how it's always been. So he goes on in verses 5 to 9. He says, "The joy of the wicked has been brief, the happiness of the impious fleeting. Though he grows as high as the sky, his head reaching the clouds, he perishes forever like his dung. Those who saw him will say, 'Where is he?' He flies away like a dream and cannot be found. He is banished like a night vision. Eyes that glimpsed him do so no more. They cannot see him in his place any longer." So Zophar argues here that whatever happiness the wicked might enjoy, well, it's only short-lived. It only lasts a little while. And he may have grown as high as the sky, but he will soon be brought down. He's like a dream or a night vision that quickly passes. In verse 9 there he says, "Eyes that glimpsed him do so no more." So he's gone. Nobody sees him again. In verses 10 to 18 he speaks of how the wicked will lose whatever it is they have gained. He says here, "His sons ingratiate themselves with the poor. His own hands must give back his wealth. His bones, still full of vigor, lie down in the dust with him. Though evil is sweet to his taste, and he conceals it under his tongue. Though he saves it, it does not let it go, holds it inside his mouth. His food in his bowels turns into asp's venom within him. The riches he swallows, he vomits. God empties it out of his stomach. He sucks the poison of asps. The tongue of the viper kills him. Let him not enjoy the streams, the river of honey, the brooks of cream. He will give back the goods unswallowed, the value of the riches undigested." So the wicked will lose whatever it is they have gained, and their gains are pictured here as this food which is held in the mouth. It's being tasted, but it's not being digested. In verse 18 he says, "He will give back the goods unswallowed, the value of the riches undigested." So he may have these things, but it's going to be of no benefit to him because he's going to lose it all. It'll be vomited out again. In verses 19 down to 28, he goes on to say this concerning the wicked: "Because he crushed and tortured the poor, he will not build up the house he took by force. He will not see his children tranquil. He will not preserve one of his dear ones. With no survivor to enjoy it, his fortune will not prosper. When he has all he wants, trouble will come. Misfortunes of all kinds will batter him. Let that fill his belly. Let him loose his burning anger at him and rain down his weapons upon him. Fleeing from iron arrows, he is shot through from a bow of bronze, brandished and run through his body. The blade through his gall strikes terror into him. Utter darkness waits for his treasured ones. A fire fanned by no man will consume him. Who survives in his tent will be crushed. Heaven will expose his iniquity. Earth will rise up against him. His household will be cast forth by a flood, spilled out on the day of his wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the lot God has ordained for him. So the troubles that afflict the wicked will be the consequence of their own actions and will be an expression of the anger of God. And God is pictured here as a warrior who's attacking the wicked with weapons, with iron arrows and with a bow of bronze. And he says in verse 27 that heaven will expose his iniquity and earth will rise up against him. So what he's done is going to be exposed, and he will have to face this day of wrath. And then in verse 29, he summarizes this by saying that this is the lot of the wicked. This is what God has ordained. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the lot God has ordained for him. So this is what God has determined will happen to the wicked. They may get some things, but they're going to lose them. They may have family, but it's all going to be taken away from them. Well, we have Job's response to this now in chapter 21. And in verses 1 to 6, he goes on to say this. Job said in reply, "Listen well to what I say, and let that be your consolation. Bear with me while I speak, and after I have spoken, you may mock. Is my complaint directed toward a man? Why should I not lose my patience? Look at me and be appalled, and clap your hand to your mouth. When I think of it, I am terrified. My body is seized with shuddering." Job wants his friends to listen to him. He's made that plea before as well. He wants them to show more sympathy, more empathy towards him. We see the distress that Job is in here in verse 6 when he says, "When I think of it, I'm terrified. My body is seized with shuddering." Verses 7 to 16, Job explains how he views the wicked and what they go through. We've heard what Zophar says about the wicked, and now this is what Job has to say about them. He says, "Why do the wicked live on, prosper and grow wealthy? Their children are with them always, and they see their children's children. Their homes are secure, without fear. They do not feel the rod of God. Their bull breeds and does not fail. Their cows calf and never miscarries. They let their infants run loose like sheep, and their children skip about. They sing to the music of timbrel and lute, and revel to the tune of the pipes. They spend their days in happiness, and go down to Sheol in peace. They say to God, 'Leave us alone. We do not want to learn your ways.' What is Shaddai that we should serve him? What will we gain by praying to him? Their happiness is not their own doing. The thoughts of the wicked are beyond me." So as Job sees it, the wicked do prosper. The wicked enjoy life. And Job gives us this picture here of a happy family, a secure family. Their cattle are breeding. There's no problems with the cattle. No miscarriages amongst the calves. Their children are running around. They're singing to the music and dancing. He says in verse 13, they spend their days in happiness and go down to Sheol in peace. So they live a happy life and they die in peace. This is how Job sees things. Then in verses 17 to 26, he goes on to say this: "How seldom does the lamp of the wicked fail? Does the calamity they deserve befall them? Does he apportion their lot in anger? Let them become like straw in the wind, like chaff carried off by a storm. You say God is reserving his punishment for his sons. Let it be paid back to him that he may feel it. Let his eyes see his ruin, and let him drink the wrath of Shaddai. For what does he care about the fate of his family when his number of months runs out? Can God be instructed in knowledge, he who judges from such heights? One man dies in robust health, all tranquil and untroubled. His pails are full of milk. The marrow of his bones is juicy. Another dies embittered, never having tasted happiness. They both lie in the dust and are covered with worms. Job expresses his view here that the wicked should get the punishment that they deserve, but they don't. They get away with it. And in the end, everyone dies, regardless of their condition. He speaks of the healthy person there who dies, whose bones are, he describes the marrow being juicy. He's in robust health. He's all tranquil and untroubled. Marrow of his bones is juicy. And then another man dies who's embittered, who's never tasted happiness. And he says they end up in the same place. They both lie in the dust. They're both covered with worms. So what's that all about? We all die regardless of our condition. So why isn't it that the wicked get away with it like this? Verses 27 to 24, he goes on here to show that his friends' words really do not reflect what happens out in the real world, that the wicked enjoy life and they are spared calamity. He says, "Oh, I know your thoughts and the tactics you will devise against me. You will say, where is the house of the great man, and where the tent in which the wicked dwelled? You must have consulted the wayfarers. You cannot deny their evidence, for the evil man is spared on the day of calamity, on the day when wrath is led forth. Who will upbraid him to his face? Who will requite him for what he has done? He is brought to the grave while a watch is kept at his tomb. The clods of the Wadai are sweet to him. Everyone follows behind him. Innumerable are those who precede him. Why then do you offer me empty consolation? Of your replies only the perverty remains." So Job is saying here, well, the view that his friends have expressed about the wicked suffering because of their sin, well, that's not reality. Because when you look in the real world, well, the wicked are doing all right. The wicked enjoy life. They're spared calamity. No one's holding them to account. And in the end, they receive a fancy funeral, an honourable burial. However, we should always remember that a person's circumstances on earth are not an indicator of their spiritual condition. And that's behind all of this here. And Job concludes here by saying that his friends have offered him empty consolation. Why then do you offer me empty consolation? And offering him falsehood and treachery. He doesn't accept their arguments on this. So to briefly summarize these two speeches, the final two speeches in the second round of speeches here, Zophar's second speech and his final speech: "You offend me. You know how the rules work. Your self-righteousness betrays you. For all know that such pride characterizes the wicked." And then Job's reply to that in chapter 21, "I realize that I am risking a lot by pressing legal action against God. Do you realize how many wicked people prosper despite their arrogance against God? He does nothing about it. In such a world, it is a complex and terrifying thing to try to call God to account. If God does not consistently punish the wicked, couldn't we conclude that he does not consistently protect and prosper the righteous?" So there's a summary of those two speeches, and so a few questions to reflect upon from all of this. And we've covered quite a lot this evening in four speeches that we've looked at. Do you see any expressions of faith in Job's words? Can you pick out any moments of hope amongst all of the despair in his words. Do you see any parallels between Job's experiences and the experiences of Jesus? Job spoke confidently that his vindicator or his redeemer lives. And how is the role of our redeemer, Jesus, different to Job's redeemer? And from your observations and experiences, do you agree with Job that the wicked get away with it? So something to think about. We will stop sharing there.